Hi everyone. We're back for another episode of Worth the Hype. This time we're talking about the new MING 3711, right? 3711 Odyssey, right? So as quoted by Ming Tian himself, this is their first dive-based GMT and one of their lightest dive-based GMT watch available out there, right? So let's get into the specs, right? So this watch is made with grade 2 titanium. It is 38 millimeter. It is very similar to the crap. Now I can't remember the number. The Kyoto GMT available. I think it's 22 or something at the top of my head. Very similar looking. However, one quick note as well: the other watch available then is a grade 5 titanium. They actually went down to a grade 2 titanium. Not sure why. Maybe that's required to make it in a higher water resistance. This one is water resistance of 300 meters, whereas the previous GMT it's only 100 meters, 100 meters. Sorry. And other than that, the thickness is 12.6 millimeters and lug to lug of 44.5. Right. It's available in 3 particular configuration. You have the new Polymesh, which we'll talk about it in our shorts, the new 3D printed grade 5 titanium Polymesh with your grade 2 watch. And you have the bracelet, which is at 6,900, and you have your rubber straps, right? So that's the 3 configurations available for you to pick and choose, and it's all at a pretty hefty price point, right? Just for reference as well, the previous watch, the GMT watch is about I think about 4,000 US dollars. So it's a big step up in terms of price point over there. What do you think, Woody?
Well, I think Ming is really on an upward trajectory when it comes to both the amount of design convergence and layers upon layers of their own design DNA on top of it, adding new things on top, but in a commensurative fashion, the prices have gone up as well. Some of my old friends in the industry know this is one brand I love to hate on, even though I am technically his fellow countryman. It's one of those things where the man has made it really big. I think there's a lot to talk about with this timepiece as well, which I won't jump into just yet. But off the offset, from a quick glance, the nice thing about any Ming watch, and it still resonates with this one here, is the fact that from a glance, you know it's a Ming watch. He's done so well for himself that this is now a part of the design DNA. You cannot mistake it for anyone else. Where there'll be other brands where if you go from one release to another release, you're not sure it's the same brand. But this one here, I think we have to give kudos to Ming there. But the prices are something that I was not expecting to see, although it should be now par for the course when it comes to Ming watches. So I think it will be a lot to go through there with our criteria. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. Right. Let's get straight into it, right? The very first criteria, is it worth it at retail? Right. So one thing that we gotta factor in as well, right? There's 2 hats that you would normally wear, right? One hat is in terms of a business perspective, which is the brand of Ming, and the other hat is in terms of the watch enthusiast perspective, right? Where we are coming from is very much on the watch enthusiast perspective. So if I were to talk about it, if I were to put on a business perspective, it's Ming doing the right thing by upcharging their watches and so on. It's absolutely, because as a business, you need to always look at ways where you could be able to bring in more revenue for the company. But ultimately, that's what you need to do as a business to then survive, and allows you to then bring on to the next project and to do more things, right? So don't get me wrong, we absolutely understand, but we are purely talking about from a watch enthusiast perspective over here, right? So at this price point, right, I think immediately the first questions I ask myself, right, when going into the Kyoto GMT over to this particular watch, which is very, very similar. Yeah? The main difference is that now that you have a downgrade, minor downgrade of materials from grade 5 to grade 2, and you have a enhancement in terms of a additional GMT bezel, inner GMT bezel over here that allows you to track the additional time zone, and you do have a increase of water resistance down up to 300 meters, right? But then the question is, who's this for, right? Do you need to be able to track 3 time zone being 300 meters down in the water? That's my immediate big question, right? It's like, why? Yeah, so I personally would rather, I mean, if I were to be paying at this price, I would rather have Ming include a more, I would say, supplementary features with the GMT versus something that is very, in a way, contradictory to each other. But I don't think you necessarily see the pairing of being deep down under the sea/ocean and still wanting to be able to track 3 time zone in there. In that doesn't really make sense to me. And on top of it, paying an exorbitant amount of price increase versus the 22 series, right? Adding all and all together, I really don't see who would want to pay this exorbitant amount of price for the 3711 unless, I think the only caveat here is you are truly fan of the Ming design, because that's something that you can't put a price on it. As Woody mentioned, this is the only place where you're able to get the, in a way, one of a kind design language of Ming. And I have to say, it looks pretty. It looks pretty, right? It looks beautiful, which I'll talk more about in the aesthetic portion as well. So in that sense, having all these relevant points that I've mentioned or the context that I've set up, I really don't see any reason to purchase it, especially looking at several thousands of different other options that you're able to get in the market if you were looking at a watch that allows you to get 3 time zone, or a watch that allows you to get a 300 meters water resistance. You're kind of spoiled for options at its price point, especially if you're looking to pair it with the Polymesh bracelets at almost $7,500, which is an incredible big ask for a modified Sellita movement watch. So yeah, that's my take on it. Over to you, Woody. And overall that makes it a 0 for me. Yeah, and over to you, Woody. Yep.
Okay, so let me give a very, very simplified view, right? As a watch enthusiast, when this came up, it was like, nice watch. It's a Ming. Oh, it's a part of the dive platform. Interesting. Oh, it's got a GMT. Interesting. What's the price? 6 to 7,000 US dollars. My first reaction is close window. So where I'm getting at with this is, as a watch enthusiast, being exposed to many different brands, Ming is now operating in what I would say is like in between. It's like a part of the stratosphere in the sky already. So you have then the upper echelons where you've got your Audemars Piguet, you've got your Patek Philippe's and whatnot. You've got the Rolexes all up there, right? Cartiers and whatnot. He's getting there already. So in order to subscribe to that price point, you need to believe that he and his brand belongs that point. And that's where my dilemma is. And why I say that is because I give him full hats off. It's the right thing to do, as James mentioned. As a business, this is the right thing to do, right? You keep bringing it up as much as you can. And I think one important difference to this watch as well is it's no longer a limited production watch either. So this is part of a slight leaning of a change of strategy. You now see Ming watches more as regular production. So it's almost like a signal this is where my new baseline and tight level is going to be for Ming already. And then I have to ask myself the question, do I have peace of mind to pay that sort of amount of money for all of this, right? Then it becomes a case of relative terms, because you then want the brand recognition, and you also want the peace of mind of the ownership. And you also need to translate to how much of it goes into marketing dollars and whatnot as well, right? Because again, it's brand recognition as a result. So let me give you two different extremes. One is Tag Heuer. Tag Heuer operates at around this price points for its chronographs as well. It's a lot of it is marketing money. You see them on F1, you see them everywhere, paying ambassadors and whatnot. Ming doesn't do that, but it's operating at that price point now. But the movement within the Tag Heuer is by and large pedestrian movements, right? I would argue Ming's hasn't spent that much money into marketing, all into the design. But don't get me wrong, this movement is also pedestrian. It's a Sellita 330, and that you can actually find this type of watch movement. Granted, there's modifications to make it a bit more robust, decorated even more beautifully, and all that, which we'll come to later, right? But the base movement, without much ingenuity, can be found in watches less than 1/3 of the price. So you're paying 2/3 of this price point into the up trend that Ming has successfully delivered and into the design. So my point to you is this: you better love the design, right? If you don't, and you're not willing to pay that amount for the design, and you put all of that together, I don't see how it's worth it. So when I look at it, I cannot yet accept Ming at where it needs to be at as a business. And so my bias is still there. And so I'm scoring it no, because in the past, even if you have a bit of FOMO, I would say, okay, if you really like it, you get it, because after this, the prices, people will flip it a bit higher, right? But because this is regular production already, I don't know whether there's any more urgency. And so whether you're buying it as, you have to really like it and really want it in order to justify this sort of price point for this watch. And that's where I will leave it at. Back to you, James.
Fair point. So jumping next into is it worth it a secondary market, right? So I think one thing that if you're really fan of this, I would personally nudge you into looking at other Ming watches that you could get, right? Which is the same one that I've mentioned, the Kyoto GMT, the 2022 series. You would probably be able to find that at a secondary market at maybe slightly under 4,000 US dollars, or maybe around there. Same case dimension, both 38 millimeters, with a grade 5 titanium over a grade 2. Yes, it's only at 100 meters water resistance versus 300, but let's face the fact, how many of you actually goes below that, right? And it's also the same movement, right? Only thing you're losing out is a additional bezel. That's something that you will not, in comparison to the 3711, that's something you lose out for. But is that worth paying an additional of maybe 2,500 to 3,000 price premium? I don't think so, at least for me. So even just by looking within the main catalog, I think you're probably better off buying the older version of Ming that you can get. And in fact, the 22 series is a limited edition, if I'm not mistaken, versus this being a regular production. So there is only, I believe, 1,000 units of them available. So yeah, I, with that being said, I really can't see any form of way for that you really want to buy the 3711 unless you really, really like the design so much more than the older other Mings, or you want to pair it with the Polymesh bracelet, but you could also buy the Polymesh bracelet separately. So yeah, I really don't see any other reasons that you really want to own the 3711 amongst the other options, aside from either really liking the design or really absolutely wanting it brand new, right? So with that being said, I would score it a 0 over here, because even if you don't look at the main catalog itself, if you look elsewhere, you have way more options in terms of getting a GMT watch or a diver watch, or if something that if it's having both in terms of the dive functionality and the GMT, it's something that you need in your specific requirement. And I guess this perhaps also fulfills that requirement, because I don't think there's any watch out there that fulfills both requirements. So yeah, over to you, Woody.
So the past movement, past watches and releases by Ming, I think prior to 2025, right? There was always this element of FOMO, because there were always limited runs and whatnot. So it's either you get it now and forever hold your peace. And because Ming has done so well business wise, and hats off to him, because I think his is a model that every budding new watch brand will want to follow, and it is one of the best models that I've seen yet. But that FOMO is now gone, because if you don't buy it today, it's still available. You can still probably get it months down the road from them, right? And that used to bake into the secondary prices kicking up as well. And I think whoever buys this will still have a fragment of that shadow lingering effect that this watch will hold its value and whatnot. But I just don't see it already. By going into this space, it's a new territory for them. You may be able to find people who might let it go. But again, at this sort of price point, most people don't buy it on a whim anymore. Like at 7,000 US dollars, most watch enthusiasts think very hard before buying it, and they must really like it and really want it to get it, right? Unlike those which operate in let's say half or even less than half of that price points, they are irresponsible watch enthusiasts like myself, who will go like, I can play around with it and I don't feel so bad about it, right? And there are those, it's at a price point where you don't feel the pinch as much. And so I find that it's very hard to justify already. I like where James recommended. Look at if you're looking for the design DNA, it's honed in now to a level where it's so good. But because he's done such a great job before, even all the previous watches like the Mosaic or the previous GMTs, if you can get a good price there, I think that's where I'll point you to. I wouldn't ask you to wait for this one because again, this is like paying honor to celebrate the success of how far Ming has gone, right? And it's where he needs to be business-wise. But as a pure watch enthusiast point of view, it's a 0 for me. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. Let's move on into aesthetics, right? Aesthetics over here, I have to say it is really, really, really beautiful, right? So one of like my favorite watch from Ming, it's the War Timer, and it has that element of this as well. It has that see-through dial that it's not 100% see-through, but it still allows you to get a glimpse inside of the watch, and that several layers of how he has in a way played with the dial. It has that 3D floating effects and so on that absolutely works, right? It to a certain extent is a little bit mesmerizing, right? And every elements play well into there. I love the hand, and the how they have included the inner bezel this time. It's quite hidden, and it's quite subtle. And if you don't know, you don't know there's actually a bezel in there. So that's why it's like props to it. Everything just works, right? Especially if you pair it with the, in my opinion, the bracelet. That's probably the ones that looks absolute the best combo aesthetic wise, right? Functionality, perhaps in terms of the strap or even the polymesh, but in terms of aesthetic, I think it looks fantastic with the bracelet. It just looks really, really nice, and everything just gels together. Yeah, it looks nice on the top. If you look at the back as well, they have decorated the Sellita movement. It looks beautiful as well. Everything, it's in theme, right? It's at sleek, dark, just elegant. All right. That's all I can describe it as best as I could with words. But if you just look at it, it just looks well. It's done well. I have no qualms about it, and I can't fault it as well. It looks really, really, really good. So it's a full one for me over here. And over to you, Woody.
This watch is so well done. For all the negativity that I've covered in the previous criterias, right? I find myself going like this. You just have to take it down to its constituent parts, even as you look at it from a distance, right? It's semi-translucent, so you can almost see into the movement. That means that it needs to be done well. If you've seen a lot of skeleton watches, very few brands do it well. And this hide and seek sort of effect is something Ming did from way before. I think they won a GPHG award for their GMT before on this as well, right? And they bring this back and it's done very well. And then they've already enhanced the way they execute Loom now. That picture that we showed, if for those of you on YouTube that see the light and the dark effect, that whole glass effect under certain light and then under dark, it also has a very unique view about it. Also really nice. And then the fact that they bothered to even make small details like looming a little bit of the crown and having a red paint to make sure that like how some watch brands do it to remind you to screw the crown back down as well, right? Every little design element here just works. And objectively, it's a wonderful execution. And it feels like a convergent point of so many of his design ideas into one. Not easy to do at all. And so we had a previous watch we covered in a previous episode where I said something along these lines, right? My head says yes, my heart says no, right? In this case, this is a watch that emotionally I look at it and it's like, wow, this is really nice. But then when I start thinking a bit more about how much they're asking for and what it really is, that's when it goes like, no. So it's almost like the reverse effect coming now, right? But from a design standpoint, it is so hard to get to a level like this. And my hats off. I think this is one of those rare gems in the watchmaking industry where everything comes together over years of design, right? So kudos to Ming. Back to you, James.
Fair enough. Right. And yeah, I mean, like I say, as much as like trash that I've spoke about in the past two criteria, I think credits where credits due. Aesthetic wise, it looks so well. Like if the price was just right, immediately I would even if I just look at the picture without looking at the price, but the first thing that goes into my mind is like, is there a chance? Is there a world that I could sell my 1709 and start making my way to get this watch and so on? But at this price point, probably not. But yeah,
Yeah, so I think
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
going to ask you this question then, right?
Yeah.
And because I found myself asking this question to myself. If someone offered you this watch and let's say money wasn't an object, right? Would you say yes to owning it?
Yes, even though if it means tying down one permanent slot of my watch collection and aren't able to sell it, if money is not an object and if I can't flip it as well, no issue, right? I would happily own one of this into and in my collection because like I think one, it is robust enough in terms of having water resistance and so on and whatnot. And I like that it's brushed because one of the issues that I have with my 1709, the polish bezels and so on gets quite scratched up. So mine is actually quite scratched up already if you actually look closely. And this very much solves that problem. And like I mentioned, the one Ming watch that I've always wanted to own was the world timer, which has very similar element with this, but although different functionality. So I'll happily own one of the sort of like a translucent, see-through Ming watch as a permanent collection to have, right? But yeah, unfortunately, the price is something I'm not willing to pay because there are just other watches that I would rather own at this price point, right? But yeah, that's it. It is what it is.
Yes.
All right. So moving on next into horological feature, right? Yes, it is a Sellita movement. And it is used in many other Ming watches prior to this. But I will have to give credits over there as well for them to take it up a notch and give it a inner rotating bezel, right? Which is something that is taken up, I would say, another notch versus their previous modification, which I think the previous modification is a little bit meh because the previous modification is just very much removing the date functionality and so on. Nothing really much to shout about. But now that it's an additional thing that goes into there, you have an actually rotating bezel, and you could use that to track a third time zone over there, right? So I think that's requires a little bit more effort in order to execute it and makes it work well. And I would say the execution wise, at least in terms of both functionality and design perspective, it gels really well together. So over here, I would give it a 0.5 for that particular innovation over there. And over to you.
I think the way to look at this is as follows. We usually are quite harsh with this about whether a brand is bringing something new with the movements and whatnot. I would say from a movement perspective, it's not where the innovation is. It's the sum of its small parts, right? So like James mentioned, it's how it is now using that movement and there's a rotating bezel that still keeps the visual balance as well, the two crowns keeping the visual balance, maintaining all of this with a 300 meter water resistance, while still introducing what are slightly more fragile concepts like a inner glass and whatnot, right? And the full glass caseback, sapphire caseback as well. It's all these little things that no one has to do that, you cannot fault them, you cannot mark them down for this. So it's not groundbreaking, but all these small things that they've done is it's really a nice feeling to see these all come together. So I'm giving it half a mark because in a traditional sense, I can't give a full mark for the way that we've done our episodes. I don't think they deserve a 0 for this as well. So somewhere in between seems about right. Back to you, James.
Right. Okay, so down to wearability, right? At 44.5 luck to luck, I don't think there's very much to talk about here, right? Wearability is going to have absolutely no issue, and you are spoiled for choice, right? Because you have a total of 3 options available. You have your bracelet, you have your polymesh, you have your strap as well, right? You're totally spoiled for choice, and all of those comes with their own version of a micro adjustment or a very minor micro adjustment. So yeah, I really don't think you have any issue whatsoever in any gender as well. You would be able to wear this watch fairly well, right? So it's a full mark for me over here. Yeah, it's a great size. Over to you, Woody.
Wearability is amazing on this watch, only with one caveat. And I give credit to Ken from Deluxe for pointing this out because he's actually tried the Polymesh in person, right? There is some resistance for the Polymesh near the Lux, so it will fight your wrists and it doesn't collapse so easily. So I would go similarly to what James mentioned. At this particular measurement is wonderful even for the tiny wrist type. No question there on the strap and on the titanium bracelet. But for the Polymesh, I would give it a mark down. But given that it's your choice, it's an option, and both James and I are in alignment here, it's the standard titanium bracelet that we're pointing you to. For that, I'll give it a full mark as well. Ming is not one of the brands that I ever worry about with wearability. I think he just knows how to get this right for people of all wrist sizes, right? So full marks there from me. Back to you, James.
All right. So that sums it up, right? We have both identical scoring from us, which is a 2.5 from each of us. That brings it smack in the middle of 5 out of 10, right? So yeah, I think overall, if we take out price out of the equation, I think it's a fantastic watch, right? I know it started out really harsh at the start, but yeah, it is really pricey, right? Super pricey for a Sellita based movement. I say yes, there's a lot of other factors that comes into it. But yeah, it could it be priced better? Possibly, but I can also understand why Ming it's not able to price it that low, right? I think it's both their in a way the genius of their work and also in terms of their consequences of their work, right? Because they have both the high horology Ming and the cheaper version of Ming under the same brand, right? So they cannot dilute the price of the brand too much as well, right? So imagine if this is you have Rolex and Tudor, but you're paying for a Tudor watch under the Rolex name, you can't price it too low as well, right? There's a reason why brands starting having their own separate line to able to price it accordingly, according to the brand, in a way, brand level as well, right? I think that's probably a something that Ming needs to figure out in the future. Do they totally cut off the lower price points of their production and just focus on their high horology side of things, or should they come out with in a way a side brand that better serves the lower price point consumers with appropriate price point as well, right? I think that's a question for me. But yeah, any last words, Woody?
I think the question I asked you earlier about whether if money no object, whether I'll pick this up. Actually, even in my case, I would. It's just that because money is an object here, right? I cannot say yes. But having said that, I also believe this is the baseline they're going to set already. Because if you notice, the past few releases, they now have regular production watches, and it's at this price point. I think this is the new water level they're going to set. So I think it's a case of whether us, and I speak to as from myself as well, right? Whether I can come to terms with the fact that this is where it's going to be. And once I desensitize to the whole thing, maybe yes. But because we've been in this watch enthusiasts for a long time, right? So you've seen the brand evolve as well. So you know of what's there, and that's where the bias exists as well. The legacy bias exists. So I think if no question in my mind, this I reflect on even how we score this, right? I would buy it if the price is right. But as it stands, the price isn't. So it's one of those things where I look forward to see where they take this now, because they've now set that line in the sand already, right? So what is the like all the special case project will probably now sit very high up now. I'm very curious as to what James mentioned as well. Like, what do they do if they still will pursue the anything below this, right? That will be an interesting thing for us to keep an eye out for. So I wait and see, but at this point in time, amazing effort, just not for me at this stage.
Fair enough. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And that's it for this episode. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.